What happens when the one person who understands you is the one person you are forbidden to love? Julian never expected to see Eleanor again. Not like this. It had been 3 years since the divorce papers were signed, severing his ties with Sophie. 3 years of awkward holidays avoided, mutual friends divided, and a silence that covered his old life like a heavy blanket. Julian had moved to a quiet coastal town in Washington, convinced that the chapter involving Sophie's family was closed forever. Until that rainy Tuesday in a dusty, second-hand bookstore. He was in the history section, running his finger along the spine of a biography, when he heard a laugh. It was low, melodic, and startlingly familiar. He froze. Turning around, he saw her, Eleanor, Sophie's mother. She was holding a stack of hardcover books, her gray, streaked hair loose around her shoulders, wearing a trench coat damp from the rain. She looked different than the woman who used to host rigid Sunday dinners. She looked softer, more real. Julian. Her voice wasn't accusing. It was just surprised. Eleanor, he managed to say. The air in the narrow aisle suddenly felt very thin. I didn't know you were in Port Haven, she said. I moved here for the quiet, he replied. New architecture firm near the pier. She nodded, her eyes scanning his face with a kindness he hadn't expected. Sophie moved to New York. Did you know? I heard. Julian lied. He hadn't. That's good for her. She's happy. Eleanor said, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She's busy. They stood there as the rain drummed against the window pane. It should have been a quick interaction. A polite nod, a retreat to opposite corners of the store. But Julian didn't move. During his marriage to Sophie, Eleanor had been the one steady thing in a chaotic household. When Sophie would storm out during an argument, Eleanor was the one who would pour Julian a cup of tea and sit in companionable silence, never taking sides, but always offering presents. I was just going to get some tea next door, Eleanor said, a hesitation in her tone. Do you have time? Hold on just a moment before we continue. If this story is touching something in you, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. It genuinely makes a difference and helps me bring you more stories like this one. I also want to hear from you. Write in the comments, where are you right now? Are you tucked away in a peaceful village where stars fill the sky, or surrounded by the hum and glow of a city that never sleeps? It was a dangerous question. But Julian said yes. They sat in a booth by the window at a small cafe. The steam from their cups rose between them. I owe you an apology, Eleanor said suddenly, tracing the rim of her mug. Julian blinked. For what? For the end. I saw you drowning in that marriage, Julian. I saw Sophie pulling away and I stayed silent because I was her mother. But I knew you were hurting. Her honesty hit him like a physical weight. For years, he had felt like the villain of the divorce. Sophie had painted him as distant and cold. To hear Eleanor acknowledge his pain made something tight in his chest finally unravel. It wasn't your fault, he said softly. We were two different people trying to be the same person. You were good to her, Eleanor murmured. I missed our conversations, you know. You were the only one who actually listened when I talked about art or history. I missed them too. And he meant it. They talked for 2 hours. They talked about his new draft designs, about Eleanor's work restoring old canvases, about the strange, hollow feeling of an empty nest. It was effortless. It wasn't the conversation of a former mother-in-law and son-in-law. It was the conversation of two intellectual equals who had been lonely for a very long time. When they parted ways, Eleanor touched his forearm. A brief, "This was nice, Julian." It was, he agreed. Maybe we could do it again. As friends. Friends, he repeated. It sounded safe. It sounded innocent. But as he drove home, the windshield wipers counting time, Julian knew the dynamic had shifted. The door he had welded shut was creaking open. It started with emails. Articles about architecture. Photos of a painting Eleanor was restoring. It was intellectual, distant, safe. But slowly the emails turned into texts. The texts turned into phone calls that lasted until midnight. They spoke about the things they couldn't tell anyone else. Eleanor admitted she felt invisible since her husband passed away years ago. Julian admitted he felt like a failure for the divorce. They were healing each other's wounds without realizing they were creating a new one. One evening, Eleanor invited him to a jazz night at the Botanical Gardens. "I have an extra ticket," she typed. No pressure. He went. Under the string lights, surrounded by the smell of jasmine and night-blooming flowers, Eleanor looked radiant. She wasn't Sophie's mom tonight. She was a woman in a velvet dress who laughed at his jokes and looked at him with a hunger he hadn't seen in years. "You seem different tonight," Julian said as they walked along a gravel path. "I feel different," she admitted. "I feel seen." The atmosphere was charged, electric. But then reality intervened. Julian. The voice came from the shadows. Julian turned and his stomach dropped. It was David, Sophie's childhood best friend. David looked from Julian to Eleanor, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. "Are you two here together?" David asked. "We ran into each other," Eleanor said quickly. Too quickly. David didn't look convinced. He gave a stiff nod, muttered a goodbye, and disappeared into the crowd. "That's going to be a problem," Julian whispered. "We haven't done anything wrong," Eleanor said, though her voice trembled. "We are two adults walking in a garden. You know it's more than that." Eleanor stopped. She turned to face him, the string lights reflecting in her dark eyes. "I spent 20 years being the perfect mother, the perfect widow, the perfect scenery in everyone else's life. I don't want to be scenery anymore, Julian. I have feelings for you. I think I have for a long time." There it was. The truth. Julian stepped closer. "I feel it too." He should have walked away. He should have thought about the optics, the scandal, the hurt. But instead, he took her hand. It felt terrifying. It felt right. The fallout was immediate. The next morning, Julian's phone lit up. "Sophie." He stared at the screen. He hadn't seen her name in 3 years. He answered. "Tell me David is lying." Sophie's voice was ice cold. "Sophie, listen. My mother." "Really, Julian? Of all the women in the world, you had to go after my mother." "I didn't go after anyone. We reconnected. We're friends." Friends don't look at each other the way David described. Do you have any idea how twisted this is? "It's not twisted," Julian argued, his voice rising. "We understand each other. It has everything to do with you. It has everything to do with me. She is my mother. You are crossing a line you can't come back from." The line went dead. That night, Julian went to Eleanor's house. She looked pale. "Sophie called me," Eleanor said, sitting on the edge of her sofa. She was screaming. "I've never heard her like that. She thinks we're doing this to hurt her? Are we?" Eleanor looked up, tears in her eyes. "Is this just us trying to rewrite the past?" "No," Julian said firmly. He sat beside her. "This is about the present. I'm not here because of who you used to be to me. I'm here because of who you are now." They sat in silence as the clock on the mantel ticked away the seconds. They had reached the crossroads. "If we continue this," Eleanor whispered, "I might lose my daughter." "And if we stop?" Julian asked. "Then I lose myself again. And I lose you." The phone buzzed on the coffee table. A group message. Sophie had added them both. "I want the truth. Right now. If there is something going on, you tell me. If you lie, I will never speak to either of you again." Julian looked at Eleanor. Her hand was shaking. She placed it over his. "We do this together," she said. Julian picked up the phone. He typed the words that would burn the bridge to the past, hoping it would build a foundation for the future. "Sophie, we didn't plan for this. We didn't want to hurt you. But we have feelings for each other. We aren't going to lie about it anymore. Send." The 3 dots of a typing bubble appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. Finally, a response. "Don't contact me. I need space." A lot of it, the silence that followed in the weeks to come, was deafening. Sophie blocked them on social media. She skipped the holidays. Eleanor's house, usually full of noise during the season, was quiet. Julian watched Eleanor grapple with the guilt. There were days she wouldn't leave her bed. Days she questioned if love was worth the cost of family. Julian stayed. He proved that he wasn't just a fling. He was the partner she had never had. 6 months passed. Then, a letter arrived in Eleanor's mailbox. No return address. Just Sophie's handwriting. "I'm not ready to forgive everything," it read. "And I don't understand it. I think it's weird, and I'm hurt. But I miss my mom. Meet me at the pier Sunday." Noon. Julian drove Eleanor to the pier, but he stayed in the car. This was a battle she had to fight alone. He watched from a distance as Sophie, looking older and sharper than he remembered, stood by the railing. Eleanor approached her tentatively. They didn't hug. They stood a few feet apart, the wind whipping their hair across their faces. They talked for a long time. There were tears, there was shouting. But then, Sophie reached out and took her mother's hand. When Eleanor returned to the car, she looked exhausted but lighter. "She needs time," Eleanor said, buckling her seatbelt. "She said she can't be around us as a couple yet. She needs boundaries." "I can do boundaries," Julian said. "As long as she knows I'm not going anywhere. She knows." It took another year before the 3 of them sat at a table together. It was a small bistro overlooking the harbor. The air was crisp. The tension was still there, sitting in the empty chair, but it was manageable. Sophie looked at Julian, then at her mother. She took a sip of her wine. "You look happy, Mom," Sophie said quietly. It wasn't an accusation. It was an observation. "I am," Eleanor replied, squeezing Julian's hand under the table. Sophie sighed, a long exhale that seemed to release years of complicated history. I don't think I'll ever think this is normal, but I see that it's real. And you haven't hurt her, Julian. I promised I wouldn't. Good. Keep it that way. The dinner wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses. There were topics they carefully avoided. But there was also laughter, genuine laughter, for the first time in years. As they walked out of the bistro, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the water. Julian walked a few steps behind the two women, giving them space. He watched them, mother and daughter, lean their heads together, bridging the gap that had almost swallowed them whole. He realized then that life doesn't always follow the scripts we write for it. Sometimes, you have to burn the script to find the story you were actually meant to tell. Julian caught up to them, and Eleanor turned, offering him a smile that felt like coming home. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, they were walking it in the open. And that was enough.